I picked this chest of drawers up on Facebook Marketplace. It had great bones, some cute little legs. It was all solid timber, drawers on runners, but it had been used as a scratching post by the previous owner's cat. So it was desperately in need of a refinish, and I'm going to do a rustic country number on this one. Now, all good flips start with good preparation. So I'm taking off all of the handles, removing the drawers, and then I'm giving the piece a thorough clean down with Crud Cutter. Crud Cutter is a fantastic degreaser. It will cut through dirt, grease, and grime, but you do need to make sure that you get any residue off the surface with some plain hot water once you have given everything a wipe down. This is one of those steps that you cannot skip when you are flipping furniture, but it is one of the questions that I do get a lot. Why do you clean if you are just going to sand the finish off? Why can't I just go in and sand without cleaning? It seems like a waste of time. No, it's not, because anything that is on the surface of that timber, when you go to sand, say you're scuff sanding to paint it or you are completely sanding that finish off, will be sanded further down into the timber if you don't clean first. So if it's still sitting there in the timber, even when it looks like it's clean, it will stop your primer from adhering to the surface correctly. It will stop your paint from then adhering to the surface. Your polyurethane, all of the finishes that you are going to put on later will not last the test of time. So it's always a good idea to clean your piece. After everything was clean and dry, I did get my carbide scraper out, and that's because this piece had a very thick top coat. Now, if you don't know what carbide scraper is, it is a tungsten carbide blade, which is essentially a very sharp blade that you scrape across the surface to remove finish. You can use it with, say, a paint stripper, but you don't necessarily have to. And what it will do, it will remove paint, it will remove varnish, any stains, things like that, and save you a lot of time when you do get to your sanding point. Now, if you had gotten to this point and you hadn't cleaned your piece down first, then you would carbide scrape and then you would wipe it all over. If you've been following me for a while, you may have seen me do this where I carbide scrape first and then I come back over with some methylated spirits. And that's simply because when you are carbide scraping, you are not getting every single bit of that existing finish and there might be a dirty patch there. So whenever you do it, first or after carbide scraping, just make sure that you clean before you sand. Because I'd removed most of the finish, I went straight in with 120 grit sandpaper. And this is a fantastic starting point if you are sanding down any piece of furniture, any finish off. When you are sanding, you create a lot of friction on the surface, and friction creates heat. So the lower the grade of sandpaper, the more friction you are creating, which is the more heat, which means the product that is on the surface, so that stain, that varnish, is going to be heating up, and that's what gunks up your sanding disc, because essentially it's melting and collecting on the sanding disc. So you're going to find that you go through a lot of sanding discs when you are using low-grade sandpaper, and you also run the risk of creating micro texture or pigtail swirls in your work that you do have to spend a lot of time sanding out later on. So if you can, always try to start with 120 grit sandpaper. This even removed those little cat scratches, so it's a fantastic starting point. Once I'd knocked over the bulk of the sanding, I went around with my detail sander just to get those areas that I couldn't get to with my orbital sander. You could absolutely do this by hand though if you don't have a little detail sander, but I do highly recommend getting one. They're fantastic for getting into all of those little tight spaces. For the little legs, I used a combination of that detail sander and hand sanding to remove the finish. You could go in and use a paint stripper on these little legs, but just keep in mind that paint stripper does get messy. You then have to scrub it down, you have to wait for it to dry, and then you generally have to come back and hand sand it anyway to get any of the little pieces. So I find doing it this way is a little bit more time efficient. Once the little legs were done, I followed the same process with the drawers. So carbide scraping first, and then that 120 grit sandpaper, followed by 180 and then up to 240 grit. For this piece, I wanted a natural finish, but pine tends to go gold yellow when you seal it. So to counteract that, I applied a paint wash. Paint washing is essentially a technique where you are using a watered down mix of paint and applying it to the surface of the timber to change the overall color. So to stop that gold coming through, I'm applying a tan paint wash. You can see here I'm doing a test patch, and then I'm applying with my spray gun. You can do incredible things with paint washing. You can really cool timber down, you can create a neutral base, or you can add warmth, all depending on what color you actually put into the paint wash. And if you want to learn a little bit more about paint washing, washing, you want to know what ratio to use, how to apply, how to seal for longevity, I have some great guides through the link in my bio which will teach you everything that you need to know. For this chest of drawers, I applied 2 coats of paint wash. I sanded in between each coat with 400 grit sandpaper, removing all of the dust before I applied my next coat, and I went through and I actually sped up my dry time with my hairdryer. To seal this piece, I chose FIDDES Tinted HARDWAX oil in the color Oak Lightning. This is an incredibly durable finish. It will last you years with the proper upkeep, and it's replenishable, so you don't have to sand it off in a few years' time when you do need to refinish. You just reapply this one. FIDDES Tinted HARDWAX oil comes in a range of colors which you can mix together to create your own custom tones. Plus, it's stain resistant, water resistant, food safe, and it's toy safe. What I absolutely love about this HARDWAX oil though is the fact that you do not get brush marks, you don't get roller marks, you get nothing like that if you're using the right amount of product. And let me tell you, a little bit of this goes a long way. You can see here that I'm applying with a 4mm nap roller. I'm making sure that I've got a nice even coat across the whole surface and then going with the grain for my final pass. In ideal conditions, this will only take 4 hours to dry. It can take up to 6 hours, but what I've found is if you have enough airflow around the piece, it will dry very quickly. Once everything was dry, I moved on to reinstalling some new antique brass gold handles. Now remember, this is where we were and this is where we are now. You can still see that beautiful timber grain. The color overall, yes, it has that element of warmth, but it's not so in your face. It's not that real pine, gold, yellow vibe. I do love the handles. I think they complement the piece really well, and I love the subtle sheen that the Tinted HARDWAX oil has given us. I'd love to know what you guys think though, so let me know in the comments, is it a nail or a fail?